Well, hi folks, I'm Josh. Welcome back to the shop. Today I want to take a look at a comparison, hopefully, of what is my preferred whittling knife kind of edge geometry versus the typical edge geometry that comes on most whittling knives. When you purchase a new knife, for example, this is a Case Seahorse whittler, and you can see on the blade here, there is a very obvious micro bevel. And by a micro bevel, we mean, the blade is angled to a point, and then right at the tip of the blade, there is a tiny little micro bevel that's added that changes the angle that's contacting the wood quite a bit, and it adds strength to the blade because if you were to just continue that flat grind out the entire length of the blade, you would have the metal would just not be strong enough to hold up to much cutting. So most knives come with this kind of a micro bevel on there, which I've kind of illustrated right here. So there's a micro bevel where that edge is right at the edge of the blade if you look down at it this way. Now, my preferred edge on my knives have what's called a convex edge, and all that really means is that edge, that this micro bevel is just kind of rounded off. If you were to just kind of round this edge a little bit, you would end up with this convex edge, and what that creates is a little bit different feel in the wood. At least I think it creates a different feel, and it actually maybe cuts a little better. So this is a knife that I've used for a while, and that edge, if you kind of watch it in the light, you can see the light will catch on there, and you'll still see there's obviously a bit of a micro bevel to it, but it's really not a micro bevel anymore. Now that edge is not as pronounced, and it has been rounded over, and it's been convexed. Now you'll get a convex edge just by stropping a knife a bunch. If you have a micro bevel on your knife and you're stropping on a leather strop, such as this one, you will end up with a convex edge because the leather kind of compresses under the edge as you're stropping it, and it will round it over a little bit, which I think is perfect because I prefer a convex edge. If you want to maintain a micro bevel on a strop, you probably need to be stropping on just a flat surface, like a piece of, I think some people use like MDF, or just a really flat piece of wood with a little bit of polishing compound or something like that. Because if you got anything that compresses a little bit under your blade as you're putting it on there, it's gonna round over your edge a little, and you're gonna end a little convex, which, maybe it makes a difference, maybe it doesn't. Maybe there is absolutely no difference if you can, apples to apples compare a micro bevel to a convex bevel on the same steel with the same angles and everything else. Does it really make a difference? So I got to wondering, does it really make a difference? To answer that question, we are gonna, so this is a newer Rough Ryder knife that I have never, it's a Rough Ryder Congress pattern knife that I have not used for anything yet. It's not been sharpened, it's not been used in any way. So the reason I went with this knife is because it's one of the cheapest knives out there that has two identical blades, but is still in a somewhat respectable steel. So here you can see we have two blades. They are the same length. They are made from the same steel. They are the same thickness. If I sharpen them both up, I will maintain the micro bevel on one, and I'll get it as mirror polished sharp as I can get it. And then on the other one, I will create more of a convex edge on it, and then compare the two, get a couple of different woods and do some different cutting and different styles, and see if I notice a difference between a convex and a micro bevel. Let's take this knife, and I'll put it through on my diamond stones and get it up, super sharp as I would ever get one when whittling, and we'll kind of cross compare the two. Now the steel for this knife is a 440 stainless. Now, that's not the ideal carving steel, but it's acceptable. Lots of people carve with Rough Ryder knives, or old timers, or a lot of those, and they're made with similar steels. Even Case's knives are made with a stainless steel. So I know there will be some differences between the quality of a case knife and the quality of the steel in a Rough Ryder knife. This is probably hardened better as opposed to the Rough Ryder, which is, you know, a much cheaper knife. This is like, I don't know, $13, $14, whereas this is, you know, $50 plus, maybe $150, depending on which one you get your hands on. And then obviously you could get yourself like a Great Eastern Cutlery pocket carver like this one, which this blades on this are actually made out of 1095 high carbon steel. So that's a very different, much better steel, or even like a flex cut blade. These are a higher carbon steel. Very different than the steel that's in this. And I realize that. We're not really trying to compare that. We're just really trying to tell if there's much of a difference between these two types of edges. So let's get out the stones and put some edges on this knife. On the bench here I have, this is a DMT diamond stone, and it is a fine diamond stone, and I think that's a just fine place to start. We're not trying to move tons of steel. We are just trying to put a nice sharp edge on these. And for the sake of this, I will keep the micro bevel will be on the blade farther from this insignia. So this will be the one with the micro bevel. The one with closer to the Rough Ryder symbol here is going to be the one that I convex. Now, if you want to know more about my process of preparing a pocket knife for carving, a new pocket knife for carving, or at least new to you, you can watch, I have a video where I actually do that when I got my pocket carver here, my Great Eastern Cutlery pocket carver. I went through a whole video of how I prepare the blades for carving. So if you want to see more on that sharpening process, check that video out. I'll be sure to include a link on here. But for the purposes of this, I'm just going to cruise through and we'll maybe do a little time lapse of this part. Here's the edge closer to the symbol. We're going to use it and make more of a convex edge. So I got the knife all sharpened up, and here I'll show you the two blades. So this is the Convex Edge, and I scuffed the blade a little bit, but that's really not a big deal. The real matter here is that the edge is convexed and screaming sharp. So that looks good. Here's the micro beveled edge. You can really see how the light catches that edge in a nice perfect spot. There we go. And that doesn't really happen with the convexed one. You can get some reflection, but it's more rolling, and you can kind of see that, hopefully. Has more of a roll to it. And then just to compare it, here's an edge. Nope, not that one. Here's a factory edge that I have not done anything to. Still catches the light, but if you look at it really close, you can see lines in it. It's not as good of an edge. It's not polished to be quite as sharp. So I guess, you know, just to see them, make sure that they're both good and sharp. Here's a, you know, bit of junk mail. Let's see if we can just slice. So this is the convex one. Goes right through the junk mail. Micro bevel. Also no trouble. And then here's the factory edge. And it goes through, but it tears more. I can tell the difference in there. It didn't actually cut it, just it rips more than slices through the mail. Yeah, and that edge is not clean. So just to show you that they are good and sharp. Now for testing purposes, I have a couple woods to try out. This is a scrap piece of basswood here, and this is a little piece of cherry, which I'm really just using to kind of show a harder wood. Not that it's something that people always carve in, but it's definitely a little more hard, and actually I've carved a few things in cherry, so that's a good one to kind of show us a few things maybe. And then just to get some long cuts. This is just a cutoff from a 2x4, just to kind of show us maybe some differences on longer cuts as opposed to short cuts that I'll probably get in these kinds of things. So here's the edge with the micro bevel on it, and we'll try it in the basswood first. Here we go. Definitely functional. Now let's compare that to the Convex Edge and see how that goes. Honestly, that feels like it's less resistance on the blade. It's going through that cut a little more easily, and I can hear sound. It just sounds better. Like if you listen really close, let's see if we can hear it. Okay, so that's a peel on the Convex Edge. Now here's the micro beveled edge. Let's see, and we'll do it in like the same spot, so we're hopefully comparing similar grains. It just doesn't sound the same. It makes more of like a chunkin' sound as opposed to a nice fluid carbon sound. It's harder to keep it in the cut, and maybe that's just me. Yeah, now that just peels it. Feels like it should feel, in my opinion. So far, I can tell the difference. Now let's try let's do some stop cuts. Stop cuts with the Convex Edge. And it can take a big chip, no trouble there. All right, that does a nice job. Okay, now back to the micro beveled edge. You can hear it making those, and you can see a little bit of like lines in the cut. And the chips, see how chunky those chips are? They're not smooth, so that as they break away, you can see, if we look real close, see these chips are nice and chunky? See how that's got big pieces to it? It's because that micro beveled edge is almost skipping, I think, in the wood as it cuts down. Now let's switch over to the Convex Edge and see if we get the same. No, see it peels it more. Those chips are, the cracks in that chip are much finer. They're much closer together. It's doing a much smoother job of breaking that wood up as it makes that peel. As it peels up, the chips, the cracks in the chip seem a little bit finer, and it just, I don't know, just peels it better. So you can hear that kind of crunching sound as the blade is moving through the wood. And this is that micro beveled edge. All right, now let's hear that. And you can see, if you look really close, there is, that surface is not smooth. It's got tiny little striations in it. So now let's try it with this one and try to compare right next to it. So you can see this is the cut with the Convex Edge, and there's not nearly as much of the texture is much finer. Let's get a side by side here, and we'll try to get this side kind of match into that side. All right, so there's the Convex Edge, and here's the micro bevel edge. Let's see. I mean, it's not a huge difference, but I can see it's a little smoother on the convex side, and it's easier to cut with you know, obviously you can't see that, but I can feel it, that the convex edge is going through this more easily. Let's try a little end grain here. That's the micro bevel on the end grain. Well, let's try the convex edge on the end grain. I don't notice a huge difference there. It's maybe a little smoother. The cut is easier to make smooth with the convex edge. But it's not a huge difference. Well, I don't know. That does look better over here where I just cut with that convex edge. Let's see if we can match that with the micro bevel. And it just doesn't bite in as well. It's a dirtier cut that's harder to maintain. All right, so that's enough basswood. Let's, for the sake of, I don't know, consistency, let's drop each of these a little bit so that they are in peak condition for the new wood here. This is the convex edge on the cherry. That makes just fine little shavings. And with the micro beveled edge. It does not cut nearly as well. There's no doubt about that. You can see it. You can see the lines it leaves in the wood. Oh, it's way harder to push in. A lot more resistance. All right, back to the other just to be fair. Oh yeah, so much easier. That convex edge is definitely better in the cherry. There's no questions there. All right, now let's try a long cut in this 2x4. Let's see if we can make one nice. That's with the convex edge. Let's see if we can do that with the micro beveled edge. It's doable. It's harder though. It's not as consistent. It skips in the wood a bit. Let's try again in the convex. So much easier to work with. I've done enough. I think I can safely say that I can tell for sure there is a difference between the convex edge and the micro beveled edge. And I for sure think the convex edge is better. Now, is part of that possibly up to the fact that I typically carve with a convex edge? It's what I'm more used to and my hands are better at dealing with a convex edged knife? Sure, that's entirely possible that that is a factor. But I don't think it is a big enough factor to make up for the fact that the micro beveled edge is just so much harder to push through, like the hardwood in the cherry. It leaves big chippy striations in the basswood, and you know, it's harder to take a peeling on the 2x4 and make like a nice long curly Q. It's doable, but it's harder. So I mean, at the end of the day, could you sharpen your knife with a micro bevel and whittle wood? Of course you could. It's sharp. As long as it's sharp, you could do it. And it might be that you would get used to that and it would be your preferred edge, but I gotta say, if you haven't tried a convex edge on your blade, I think it's better. It's easier to push through the wood. It slices better. And this might sound funny, but it sounds better. Part of woodworking is just, you know, the meditative feel of it. And when you're slicing through wood, you know, when you're whittling, it just, I don't know, it feels good when you're slicing through wood like that. And it has a nice feeling to it. But when you're chunking through the wood, man, it just doesn't feel as good. It still produces results, there's no doubt about that. I mean, you know, I can remove wood with that micro beveled edge, and I can get there. And if I take lighter cuts, I can still get a smooth cut in that. But it's easier with this convex edge. And I can still take fine little shavings and get smooth finish, but you can also hog off a bit more. So I gotta say, this is as close as I can get to apples comparison of a convex edge compared to a micro beveled edge in the same steel, same thickness of steel, same knife, same handle. You know, there's as little variation here as possible, and I realize this is not entirely scientific. There's really, I don't know, no way for me to produce a perfectly scientific situation here, but for my preference and what I think is easier to work with, a convex edge definitely wins out here. So if you've never given a convex edge a try on your whittling knife, give it a shot. I think you might appreciate it. It's easier to maintain on a leather strop anyway. And chances are, if you've been using a leather strop, you have a slightly more convex edge than you do a micro beveled anyway, because a leather strop is gonna round over those edges a little bit. And this shows, first of all, that that's nothing to worry about, and it's very likely ideal. It's actually better. Now, that is not to discount a knife like this. So this is, you know, a Mora knife with a nice, I think you'd call this a Scandi grind or a high flat, either way, whatever you want to call it. This is a very different knife, and it's not the same. You know, I can't put this in my pocket. I can't fold this up and put it in my pocket. And it's really hard to find like you know, a whittling style pocket knife that could handle this. I mean, this is made of a laminated steel with a hard steel in the center and then softer steels on the outside, so that it can still flex a little, but it can still take this edge. If you tried to put this flat grind on one of these blades, they wouldn't hold up. They would just bend or break the edge, because they're not made to handle this kind of a situation. And you know, this will slice through cherry without any trouble, and you can put, you know, nice cuts into a 2x4, and it cuts and it slices, and you got all kinds of nice edge and lots of blade length to work with. But it's not the same thing. I mean, you know, we're looking at an edge here that you can throw in your pocket and you can maintain while you're out and about. And you know, for a whittling knife that folds up and throws in your pocket, I think, you know, this convex edge is pretty sweet. That's definitely the way to go. So anyway, thanks for watching. If you think differently, if you have a different edge geometry that you think is, you know, the whittling knife ideal, please let me know. I'd love to know if you get better results with something else. And you know, again, I know this is not the ideal steel, but it's good enough steel to let me know for sure that it makes a difference what you do with your edge. So anyway, thanks for watching. Have a good day.